Honourable Member for St. James North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to today join in the eulogies being given to three outstanding Barbadians who have served in various ways the public of this country. The first of the three who I would have met would have been Ezra Ali. When I was, if I recall, about 13, 14 years old, he lived near where I lived with my parents in Grisette's Terrace, and he was, of course, getting ready to contest the next general elections in the constituency near there in 1976. I believe at that time, in fact, it was designated constituency of St. Michael North. Slightly different configuration of what it is right now, because as you would know, sir, as a St. Michael Member of Parliament, at that time there were 8 St. Michael. There were not as many St. Michael constituencies as there are now. Your St. Michael Central seat, for one, was created after that time of the 1976 elections. And as was a regular visitor to my house, sir, I must say that. My mum taught at Commermere at that time. She was an extremely well-respected teacher there. And my father, of course, as a lawyer and a strong member of the Barbados Labour Party. There was no stronger member of the Barbados Labour Party than my father was. And Ezra used to come there and they used to chat. And I remember many occasions, Ezra and I talking, because both of us are born in May. And we used to go through the amount of world-famous people who were born in May, and we had a consensus that May was the best month of the year. So those were the times that I best remember Ezra from that start, not even speaking about us as lawyers together, sir, where we would have done some matters on opposite sides and personal injury matters especially, where he acted on behalf of the insurance company. I knew his 2 daughters well, of course, his wife, Gail, his daughter, and I. Gail used to play tennis at one time, Paragon Tennis Club, of which I'm still a member. And, you know, it's those fond memories that I have of Ezra Ali. Reverend Canon Ivan Harewood, sir. And it hasn't been mentioned yet, and I noticed that significantly, that Canon Harewood was president of the Barbados Council for the Disabled between 1983 and 1984. So there we join ties, sir, that Canon Harewood served the office of people and the cause of people with disabilities in an era where it was not fashionable to do so. That was even before my time of service started to people with disabilities, about 33, 34 years ago, sir. And for that, of course, I commend him. His picture stands in the Harambee House, the Barbados Council for the Disabled, as a former president. Out of the 3 outstanding individuals who we are eulogizing today, sir, of course, the one I would have known best is Dr. Joseph Johnny Truder, mainly because, as has been said previously by, I think, 2 members, our joining together in the cause for persons with disabilities. But Johnny, of course, is a lot more than that. He would have served, as we have heard, on the Barbados Tourism Association Board. He would have been head of the Public Relations Committee of that. And yes, Johnny credited himself for formulating the slogan, tourism is our business, let's let's all do our part. He told me that many times, that he was the individual on the board who formulated that slogan. Having served as a board member on the tourism board, sir, those of us who have followed politics for decades would recall the circumstances in which he came into electoral politics, sir. In 1991, on nomination day for the elections, the Democratic Labour Party was still hoping that Don Blackman would be their candidate. Don, of course, had been Member of Parliament for St. Michael East for the Barbados Labour Party between 1981 and 1986. He switched in circumstances that we don't have to go through now, sir. In 1986, he became the Democratic Labour Party candidate and was one of their trump cards in the 24-3 victory of the Democratic Labour Party, serving as that party's Member of Parliament for St. Michael East for those 5 years, 1986, 1991, but did not turn up at the nomination on nomination day. I believe it might have been St. Giles School, primary school, to be nominated as candidate in the 1991 election for the Democratic Labour Party. And rumor has it, sir, that in fact Johnny was called maybe about 2:30, nominations closing 3 o'clock, to try and find yourself at nomination facilities before 3, sir. Now, the Barbados Labour Party candidate in that election was Joey Harper, the late Joey Harper, sir, who has served this country well and who, in fact, is also a former president of the Barbados Council for the Disabled, sir. He would have been one of my early presidents. And as I said, rumor has it, and certainly Joey substantiated that Johnny may have reached the nomination station after the time when nominations ought to have closed, and that there was a position where the Barbados Labour Party could have challenged the nomination of Johnny, and therefore Joey would have won without a candidate. And Senior Minister, the Honourable Member for Christchurch West, who has been around politics long, not as long as I have, is there agreeing with everything I'm saying. But that is fate, sir. That is fate. The point was not taken within the spirit of, I suppose, the, democracy and the two-party system that we have. And Johnny duly won in 1991 and became an elected member of this parliament on the government side. So he became a minister of government pretty late on in that term, in that shortened term of the Democratic Labour Party, which, of course, self-destructed and only had a term of three years, just over 3 years that time, 3 years, 8 months. And Johnny, in the wake of resignation of 3 cabinet ministers, ostensibly, but for other reasons too, I assume, over an appointment as CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the Barbados Tourist Authority, and the deputy, where the then Prime Minister, Honourable Lloyd Erskine Sandiford, remained adamant in his cause to appoint who he wanted to appoint, even going so far as to make himself Minister of Tourism and appointing who he wanted to appoint. And the resignation of 3 ministers, Johnny became a minister pretty, as I said, late in the term. He was only a minister, I believe, for a few months between 1993 and 1994, Minister of Transport and Public Works. And it is within that context that this Parliament and the public have heard that he would have been instrumental in getting the first bus for persons with disabilities in this country. As I said, sir, the Democratic Labour Party was on a path of self-destruction, and in 1994, the Barbados Labour Party under the Right Honourable Owen Arthur won. Johnny, however, though, retained his seat in 1994 in a three-way fight with Jessica Odell of the Barbados Labour Party, the Honourable Member for St. Michael East, running for the NDP, National Democratic Party. Johnny retained his seat and therefore became an opposition member of Parliament. And, you know, I used to enjoy, I had obviously recently met him within the context of the cause for disabilities in the early 1990s. And even though, of course, Johnny and I would have been on opposite political sides, I admired his style in Parliament, fighting against the odds, sir. I remember him, for example, when the Barbados Labour Party brought the amendment to the Constitution to forever make it unconstitutional for the salaries of public workers to be reduced, as the Democratic Labour Party had done in 1991-92 by reducing all public servant salary, officers' salary by 8%, except judges, the Governor General, the DPP, the Auditor General, whose, as we know, sir, their terms and conditions are enshrined in the Constitution and cannot be adversely affected. Johnny, during that debate, made the comment that the Barbados Labour Party has brought this amendment to the Constitution to make the Dems look bad. And I laughed, sir. But that is the character of Johnny Truder, because as we have heard, his father was a top comedian. His father was a legend, sir. Obviously before my time, but I grew up hearing about this Johnny, Joseph Truder, Joe Truder, who was the top comedian and entertainer within that field in Barbados. And Johnny obviously inherited a lot of those traits from his father. And when you look at the pictures, in fact, I remember about 5 years ago or so when they featured Joe Truder in the newspaper, and they had a picture of him and Johnny side by side, striking resemblance between father and son. And I often say if I was good at science, I would have studied genes, because those kind of things enthrall me. But Johnny clearly was a tremendous salesman. Could sell himself as well as could sell vehicles. He represented St. Michael East for 2 terms, sir. He was also chairman. Well, before I say that, sir, after 1999 election, yes, Johnny changed political allegiance and supported the Barbados Labour Party, sir. And this, one of the issues behind that, I clearly realized that the Democratic Labour Party needed a stint in opposition for a while. He became, under the Barbados Labour Party, chairman of the Samuel Jackman Prescott Polytechnic, for which he's accredited with bringing online training to that institution, online education to that institution. He was also a member of the National Vocational Training Board during that time of Barbados Labour Party governance, sir. But the major roles and the role for which Johnny gained national honors, Silver Crown of Merit in 2020, was in the cause of advancing the rights of persons with disabilities. When I became a cabinet minister, Mr. Speaker, in 2018, I recommended and suggested to the National Council, to the Barbados Council for Disabilities, that Johnny should be put up for nomination for a national honor. He was so awarded in 2020, and he was extremely proud of that. He and I took pictures on Independence Day together, for instance, because I felt that any person who has served in the cause of advancing persons with disabilities, some of the most vulnerable group of people in this country, for 30-odd years at the time, as Johnny has done, is deserving of a national honor. He served variously as Vice President of the Council for the Disabled for years, as Secretary to the Council, as executive member on various committees, the Transport Committee that I was on, for instance, when Joey was president, Joey Harper, who I spoke about, was president of the association, and we were in negotiations with the Transport Board in terms of getting more buses for people with disabilities. Eventually, the amount was increased from 1 to 5 such buses, sir. And Johnny has been involved in so many issues relating to advancing the cause of persons with disabilities, of which I know of personally, sir, because he and I would have sat on the board as directors of council. I was on for the 5 years as an opposition MP until I became a government minister in 2018, when I obviously would have had to resign, sir, from being a director of the council. Sir, this is an opportunity, sir, to give credit to his second wife, Ms. Rosanna Truder, who is the administrative manager of that council for Council for the Disabled, because she would have joined with him and been his partner in this fight for all these years, sir, part and parcel, and obviously would have encouraged him in service for persons with disabilities. I also know his first wife, sir, Mrs. Patricia Brunton. She's a constituent of mine. His son, Jason, is also a constituent of mine. And Patricia, as well, is involved in public service. She sits on the body that advises the Prime Minister, recommends to the Prime Minister persons for judicial office. She's the civilian on that body. Johnny spoke on my political platform, both in 2013 and in 2018, sir, and was extremely happy to do so. And when I became Minister of Home Affairs, I would have taken to Cabinet, and Cabinet agreed for him to be chairman of the Government Industrial Schools. And he was extremely passionate about that role. We started the reforms of that school, for instance. I would have, on recommendation from the advisory committee, released a lot of the girls and boys at that school. When I became minister, they had about 60 minors in the Government Industrial School. By the time I left, there were less than 20, sir, especially in terms of the girls, and we channeled them into the National Youth Corps, which regrettably, of course, would have been curtailed then with COVID coming on. But I want to salute Johnny for the role he played as my chairman of the Government Industrial School. He, as we've heard, sir, he also became an ordained minister of religion, sir, and we commend him from that, for that as well. But sir, I need to speak a bit too in terms of his transition to allegiance with this party, sir. And this speaks, sir, of the maturity of our politicians in this country, and still the civility, even though maybe we are on opposite sides of the fence. And long may this last, sir. Because of the fact that then Prime Minister, now Sir Lloyd Erskine Sandiford, opted to call a general election in 1994, September, when he had faced a no-confidence vote that year, in which he did not win. And he had the option either of stepping aside and someone else becoming prime minister or call an election. He chose to call an election. And therefore, as I said, the Democratic Labour Party's term between 1991 and 1994 was short. By the time Johnny was defeated in the avalanche of seats by the Barbados Labour Party, the 26-2, in September 1999, he was just short of the period under the then rules, regulation, laws to obtain a gratuity and a pension. He was just short by a few days. There would have been two others who would have served between 1986 and 1994 who were also just short because of the early calling of that 1994 election. But the late Prime Minister, Right Honorable Owen Arthur, said, look, people have served this, and you know, sir, a lot of the public feel that people come to politics and it's a life of luxury and traveling and big drinks and all that. So we all in here know that that isn't so, sir. There's hard work, there's sacrifice on the part of your families, your children if they're small, your finances. Many of us, and I'm sure Johnny as well, probably made more money professionally or in their careers outside before they became into politics than they make in politics, sir. And this contrary to what the public feel. And Owen said, look, someone who has served 2 terms, the out a few days, I think it might have been a week or less, I changed the rules so that Johnny and these 2 others could get the pension and gratuity, sir. And that is something clearly is an admiration of the late Prime Minister, but also to the credit of Johnny. And I can tell you, sir, because I mean, I knew Johnny well, you could appreciate he was extremely grateful for Owen doing that so that he could get a deserved pension and gratuity, sir. As I said, he became aligned to the Barbados Labour Party, and that was to his credit, sir. It brings me, sir, if you indulge me for a few more minutes, sir, to speak within that context of Johnny being, the rules being changed to make that adjustment so Johnny could get a deserved gratuity and pension, to speak on issues related to terms and conditions of parliamentarians, sir. I have a much shorter time in this parliament than I have had in the past, sir. This month will be 10 years, a whole decade I've been in this parliament. And I wish to take the opportunity to thank the Deputy Prime Minister, Honourable Member for St. Michael South East, and Minister of Housing, Honourable Member for St. George South, sir, who came into this parliament with me and as opposition MPs, and who have been part, I think, all 3 of us, of each other's political development. But terms and conditions of parliamentarians, there's a fallacious view out there by a lot of the public that politicians get this big set of money, big set of salary. You know, they shouldn't get any gratuities, they shouldn't get any pension till they reach age 67. In fact, that should be increased. I hear some people saying they shouldn't get none till age 70, sir, not knowing that 10 years in politics, sir, as an elected member is like a lifetime in some other fields, sir. And I'm being serious, and I could speak with authority because, as I said, this month is 10 years for me. And I totally, and I believe it is our fault, sir. Our fault when I say our politicians, on both sides of the political fence, for not explaining to the public the full gamut of what we are called to do. The full gamut, sir, on salaries that are compared to some other countries in the Caribbean, not commensurate, sir. That as a minister of government and a sitting MP, in my opinion, sir, you should be entitled to two salaries, but yet ministers of government who are MPs get the same salary as ministers of government who are in the Senate, who don't have a constituency. That the allowances we get, $2,500 a month, sir, well, let me speak for me, sir, that covers the expenses of my constituency office, sir. Plus the rent that is paid by government for your constituency office. In my case, sir, I add on to that because the rent I pay is more than what the government gives me. That has not changed for about 25 or 30 years. The amount, even though rents, of course, have gone up astronomically, property prices in this country. That MPs, you don't get any health insurance. Unlike in Trinidad, where the members of parliament get up to $200,000 a year in health insurance, paid for by parliament. Ministers don't have any drivers, sir, so you have to be fighting up in the traffic like everybody else. For instance, in the morning, when you may be going to make a speech at a big conference opening or whatever, and you should be thinking about what you're saying, you're fighting up in traffic, getting tense and pressured, sir. Whereas that is standard in many Caribbean countries, Trinidad, Guyana, Jamaica. In Jamaica, ministers of government have maids, gardeners, butlers, all of that, sir. In Guyana, Trinidad, they bring in duty-free cars, sir. Get cars on duty-free every 3-4 years in Trinidad. We don't have any of those terms and conditions, not one of them, sir. It even support staff in a situation where, unless you're a minister of government sitting in cabinet, you don't have a personal assistant. In Trinidad, you got about 4 employees, sir. There are rooms in Parliament, in the Trinidad Parliament, offices for members of Parliament, sir. Here, you got to be scotching up in somewhere, and if a minister has a meeting, you got to leave. So no place that you could meet or do research or whatever. These are things, sir, not for the benefit of the member of Parliament, but for the benefit of the people who we represent. And there's the point that I wish to make. It's not a personal benefit. It's for a personal assistant to every member of Parliament. Not a personal benefit. It helps with your representation of your constituency. And we don't have it in Barbados as they have it in other countries. In Trinidad, every member of Parliament given $50,000 every month that they could do what they want with in terms of employing people within the constituency, doing projects within the constituency. In other countries, and all of this is CARICOM, I'm not going outside. Bahamas, Jamaica, St. Lucia, members of Parliament given money which they have to account for every dollar, every year. It's audited, sir. They can't take it and put it in the pocket. They have to spend it on their constituency and show how it is so spent. We don't get any of that. So we have to be begging both, sir, for a road. Roads is the hot topic now. For roads to be repaired after 30 years. Thankfully, sir, and I told the Honorable Deputy Prime Minister this morning, Sign Hill Tenantry Road repaired, sir. I drove on it last night on my way home to check after 30 years, sir. But if members of Parliament given money as in other countries directly, you won't have to be begging about welfare and ministries and all that to the extent that we have to be doing. Sir, and I'm saying this, sir, because, as I said, this would make representation easier. And the public needs to be told that members of parliament in Barbados, their members of parliament, don't get anything at all from government for their constituents. You get an allowance, $2,550 a month. Like I said, in my case, it goes towards my constituency office. Everything you do in Trinidad, when your computer needs replacing, Parliament replaces it, sir. In Barbados, you gotta replace it out of your own funds. So these are the terms and conditions. And I'm not here, as I said, trying to promote terms and conditions for members of Parliament. So it's for the people of Barbados, sir. And quite honestly, sir, where members of Parliament now abuse their positions, sir, there's no one in this house ahead of me who says, let them face the full force of corruption laws, anti-corruption legislation. And the Honorable Attorney General lay in Parliament this morning the Integrity in Public Life Bill, sir. I don't know, sir, where we got, why we get here, because we debated this, 4 years ago or 3 years ago, sir. But we back here because of the vagaries of the Senate, sir. Even though this Barbados Labour Party had all the seats, how our Constitution set up, a Senate can still defeat what is in here on an amendment to a Constitution, and so did. But I look forward to debating this renascent bill in Parliament very shortly, sir, because I fully feel, yes, members of Parliament should be adequately remunerated, sir. But if you're found with your hand in the pot, bribery, whatever, face the full force of the law, and like Singapore, put you away for life, sir. So let me balance it by saying that as well, sir. But it can't be the case where it appears to me that a lot of the public feel that members of Parliament, when they retire, should be walking about penniless, begging people for things. And I know, sir, I know that there are ministers who have served in the past, sir, who after they left politics, they're in the arms house, sir, the wives walking about begging people to buy products that they're selling, that kind of stuff, sir. Because we don't have a situation such as in Antigua, for instance, where every time the pension or gratuity of current members of Parliament serving rises, that the previous members of Parliament, ministers who are still alive, that their pension or gratuity increases as well, sir. And like I said, sir, I feel the opportunity. I've been looking for it for a while to make these points. As I said, someone who served now 10 years in here, who don't have as long in here as I've had in the past, sir. And to speak on that issue within the context of a situation where a prime minister had to change the present regime, legal or regulatory regime, so that Johnny, well-deserving, could have got some reward for the rest of his life, sir.
I remember we have 2 more minutes.
Yes, sir. So, sir, I again wish to, on behalf of the constituents of St. James North and my family and myself, sir, thank the respective relatives of the 3 individuals who we are paying tribute today, sir, and may their long rest in peace in the company of the Almighty. I thank you.